Diversity and inclusion is becoming an increasingly important focus for many organizations across the world, and with good reason. Perhaps the best way to understand diversity is to take a look at nature. So ecosystems that are diverse are far more productive. In other words, they support far more life. They tend to be far more resilient to adverse conditions, and diversity also allows them to adapt faster. So this essentially is exactly the same kind of characteristics that most organizations are looking to develop nowadays. So this phrase here, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, is a great way to differentiate diversity and inclusion. So diversity is not only about managing the processes that change the demographic composition of your company, but also about processes that promote a sense of belonging and participation. So let's take a look at the diversity dashboard. In this dashboard, we've used the same X and Y axis. So tenure from start date, time in workforce, but we've used different bubble colors. So gender diversity is not the only diversity that you can consider. There are other diversity types that we can take a look at, but for the sake of convenience, I'm going to use this particular illustration here because the gender diversity is one of the more common challenges across most cultures and companies. So in this case, the gray bubbles represent individuals who identify as male, and the terracotta bubbles represent individuals who identify as female. For the sake of simplicity and time, I'm only going to deal with those two identities. We can immediately see that there's a lot more representatives of the gray group than the terracotta group. So immediately just having a look at that, we can visually consume that information and we can draw some conclusions. So this allows you to have conversations about processes that can increase representation. So for example, could we change our hiring practices? Could we look for more diverse talent pools? Is there an opportunity to have greater or more diverse representation in our hiring panel? So you can also have conversations about practices that retain diversity once you bring different people into the company, like working conditions, flexible working hours, childcare facilities, remote working, which is obviously a very important issue nowadays. You can also create specific initiatives to help newer people connect with more experienced people and identify people that could act as support groups that could catch some of these diversity issues early. Now, the benefits of diversity are stated down there. What we tend to do is we always try and provide some type of context that you can reference so that your audience has some idea of why are we looking at this data, what are we looking at, and how should I engage with it. Here are some of the questions that you could stop and think about now. So even if this is not currently a conversation that you're having, it might be worthwhile thinking about some of these questions in terms of diversity. So is this a conversation that your organization needs to have? Are you having it? Do you have a company culture that is currently diverse and inclusive? Who would benefit the most from having this conversation? Now, this mostly depends on where you are in terms of the maturity of your diversity and inclusion initiatives. If you're still in the early stages of awareness, then having this conversation with senior managers would probably be the right starting point. If your initiatives are more mature, then having this conversation with the people who are responsible for the initiatives that would increase and promote diversity and inclusion would probably be more appropriate, because some of that data would start to show the impact of the initiatives that are taking place in your organization. And then the last question, how mature and effective are your HR processes that are related to diversity and inclusion? Processes like talent acquisition, interviewing and screening processes, cultural awareness, onboarding, social integration, those type of things.